Hello and welcome to another episode of VideoSavvy Marketer, a podcast where we explore the art and science of video marketing. You know, this podcast is like TED Talk, but with fewer graphs and more bad jokes like this one. Today I have the pleasure of talking to an incredible, talented voiceover artist. He began his journey after being captivated by Shakespeare's play as a child. That's right, folks, Shakespeare. So, if you ever thought your childhood obsession with cartoons was impressive, think again. This guy had class from the day one. He has lent his voice. Again.
Sorry. I'm derailing it already entirely. I'm incredibly classy. I just want to set up a kind of a class war. I think anybody who likes cartoons are idiots. I just want to clarify that. Like, my apart from Shakespeare, you know, Transformers the movie, the animated one, not the Michael Bay stuff. You know, that's also very important to me as well. So I can do high culture and low culture. I've got great range.
All right.
Anyway,
All
sorry.
Right. I'm just going to continue with my intro, you know.
Yeah, sorry.
He has lent his voice to projects for Google, BMW, and Warner Bros. Interactive, and has voiced characters in games for Warhammer franchise and Dark Souls 2 and many, many others. Ladies and gentlemen, oh shit, I forgot to ask you something. How do I pronounce your surname?
Tester, as in testing someone's patience.
Sorry, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do.
That's great. Keep it in. This is real and vulnerable. This is like Stephen Bartlett, Diary of a CEO kind of gold right here. You got to embrace it.
I said to myself, like, the first thing I need to ask Chris is like, how do I pronounce his surname? Because I don't want to fuck this up, you know.
No, it's okay. No, it's great. It's cool. It's just leaning into the discovery.
So, and I have a phone call now. And I just
okay. This just goes to show that we're both very busy people and we've got a lot going on here. So that means your viewers, your listeners are even more lucky to kind of spend this time with us now.
I think
we're
they
both
are.
so in demand.
Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Christopher Tester.
Yeah, that's me. Hi. Thanks.
Hello, Chris. How are you doing?
Hi. I'm good. I'm great.
You're great. What do you think about this intro?
I thought it was brilliant. I think it's honestly, hands down, that's my favourite intro to any podcast that I've been on. And I've been on quite a few, I'm just going to say. Yeah, that was sterling work. Loved it. Absolutely.
I'm going to take this as a compliment, you know.
Yeah, please do. I'm not being sarcastic. I love that. That was great.
All right. Tell us about your classy start. How did you start? Like, how did you become a voiceover actor?
So I did start as an actor before I became a voice actor. So I think there does tend to be quite a distinction between there are a lot of people who are very interested in being a voice actor because they do voices. They kind of like listen to the radio or they start getting good at mimicry and that kind of like performance or doing all of the different voices in animations when you are growing up with these type of things. I very much wasn't that type of person, really. Although, you know, I did enjoy cartoons and other low culture stuff like that, as well as, you know, declaiming Shakespeare sonnets from the age of 5, which I certainly didn't do. I mean, my love of performing did originate from the stage. So when I was about 12, 13 years old, my mum took me to see the Royal Shakespeare Company in Stratford-upon-Avon in the UK, so kind of like the foremost Shakespeare performing company in the world. And we spent an entire summer seeing about 5 or 6 different kind of like plays. And without getting, you know, too kind of cliched about it, it was quite a symbolic time anyway, because my parents had just divorced or just decided that they were going to be divorced as well. So there's all this kind of, I'm not going to say trauma, but a lot of stuff going on at the same time. And as a 13-year-old boy, not really having the language to articulate what I was feeling, because I really didn't know. It was amazing to see these performers on stage, and in theory, you know, it's incredibly heightened and it's in the language that you don't necessarily understand what anybody is saying most of the time. And yet, there was still those moments of real kind of like resonance that really... I saw people give expression to the stuff that I was feeling on the stage. something outside of myself that kind of essentially reassured me that I wasn't alone in what I was feeling. How universal, even when they were dressed up ridiculously in tights, which some of them were more kind of like traditional Elizabethan productions, some were kind of, and then there was like a modern dress Julius Caesar that was going on at the same time. But that was a really kind of like profound influence for me, and that's where my love for performing kind of manifested. It was only really later I went to university, and then that's when I started really kind of like performing myself. And then I went to drama school after that. So 3 years of drama training, and the end goal was really purely just kind of like stage work. But then at drama school, I did 3 years at a place called the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama, and that's where like Laurence Olivier and Judi Dench kind of like trained. From that, one of the things that you do is voiceover work as well. You touch on it very briefly. From 3 years, you probably do about 2 weeks of actual kind of like voiceover work. It's like, here's a microphone, don't shout into it. I mean, that's good luck. Maybe it might be a good way of paying some bills whilst you're trying to get, proper, acting work. But other than that, you really didn't have much of a kind of like clue towards it. But fast forward into, I think, 2012 or 2013 was when I got my first voiceover job, which was for Dark Souls 2, so a video game. And that I just got like randomly from my acting agent at the time. And that's what kind of started the ball rolling in terms of like, oh, actually, there's a whole raft of different kind of genres out there. And maybe I could, and I enjoy it, and you don't need to learn the lines, and it can be paid very, very well, and so that was the start, and then it's been kind of like a balancing act, and then really since kind of like 2020 and the pandemic and everything, it became my full-time kind of gig, I would say.
Are you a gamer? I mean, do you enjoy playing games, and then you try to land these kind of gigs?
I mean, I am a gamer, but I'm not as much of a gamer now. Because I'm 42 years old as opposed to 22 years old. Unfortunately.
Same here,
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of like I grew up with, I was spoiled. So I grew up with, I had both a Super Nintendo and I had a Mega Drive as well. So I could play Sonic, and I could play Mario, I could play Streets of Rage, and I could play Super Mario World and Mario Kart. Absolutely amazing. And then I grew up, you start to see more kind of voice acting or acting in games like, for me, it was the Mass Effect trilogy. And it was also the Assassin's Creed. I think Assassin's Creed 2, Brotherhood, Ezio. You start to kind of like get a sense of real kind of like acting performances and stuff like that, which are and Metal Gear Solid to a degree as well, is where it starts to get cool. And then you have things like The Last of Us, and it becomes incredibly cinematic. So you start to get this kind of like wider appreciation. But I'll be honest in that I hadn't really put two and two together until I was auditioning for Dark Souls 2. Because I hadn't gone like, oh no, this is a job that people do, and they do it consistently. I always thought that it was probably like normal, quote unquote, actors who occasionally, did the odd game here or there. And so I never kind of went out on it in terms of like, I want to be a video game actor. But as the stories have got more complex and more interesting and more varied, it's become, and also the fact that it's not so dependent on how you look, specifically. You're typecast by how you sound to a degree, which can be both a blessing and a curse. But it takes looks out of the equation. And for someone like me, I mean, that I'm quite happy about that, to be honest. But because there's you get out of drama school and there's loads of weird types of things. Like I was told that, I wouldn't work consistently until I was about 40, purely off of the fact that, I sounded older than I looked. Clean shaven, I could pass for much younger, but then I actually sounded quite deep as a kind of like a voice and a register. And it's kind of like, as a stereotypical casting type, that's quite difficult to kind of like place. Can you act more? I was quite thin as well, so a bit thin and a bit kind of like gawky, so it's like, can you play nerdy characters? And it's like, well, I'm a bit neurotic, but but I don't necessarily want to play nerdy characters or more than about once. In all honesty, so taking all of that and parking it elsewhere and being able to have a bit more kind of like a freedom about the roles that you could play is one of the things that I'm attracted to. So now I don't play games so much because I don't have the time, really, but I am aware. So I have to be aware of things like Baldur's Gate 3, for example, or Alan Wake 2, for example, the various different ways, storytelling, the in-depth approach, by all means.
So tell me, I mean, I think that I heard this somewhere, but I don't remember the right answer. Like, what's the difference between voiceover artist and voiceover actor?
Yeah, well, I think that depends on who you ask. Definitely. So I mean, for a lot of people, they'll say that there is no difference. But I would say that voiceover relates to certain genres of voice acting, but it's more to do with the sound. It's more to do with the technicalities of the sound, and maybe part of the craft of voiceover is, being able to do things to time. Being able to sense the difference between when you've got 15 seconds to say something and 20 seconds to say something, and being able to have that kind of like that craft aspect to it. Whereas the acting aspect, I think, is more about, I think of the blood, the guts of, what's my objective? What am I trying to get the audience to kind of like do? So I think there's an interesting kind of like separation between those kind of two. With voiceover, you're thinking about the quality of the sound, and it feels, even as a term, it feels a little bit more depersonalized. Voiceover sounds like an object that you fit into a workflow, whereas a voice actor, again, feels a little bit more kind of like three-dimensional in some way, shape, or form, hopefully.
Yeah, because when I started to follow you on LinkedIn, like your videos, your content on LinkedIn is amazing, seriously. And
Very kind.
like, I tried something one day. I just listened to you. I didn't watch you play, and I could feel the emotion that you're trying to portray with your voice. But in fact, you were acting.
Yeah.
So, like, how did you come up with this idea? I mean, are this like paying gigs that you film yourself while doing it, or did you just like come up with a schedule? Oh, I want to impersonate, or like I want to do something. I want to voice act some hero, whatever.
Well, there's some different things to unpack there. So first and foremost, in terms of like the emotion in the words, I mean, acting is acting. I would think. What it can be a difficult distinction, and one distinction maybe between voice acting and voiceover to a degree, is that with voiceover, if you've got purely only the voice to depend on, sometimes you need to indicate. You need to give it a little bit more to show that you're really happy or really sad, all of that kind of thing, because people don't have a face to read the expression with as well. So you've got to be less subtle to a degree as well, which with your voice acting hat on, people would say is a little bit hammy, a little bit inauthentic, a little bit too much. So that's where I think voice acting usually filters more in with maybe a video game kind of thing, where you've also got a character's expressions. As it gets more cinematic, it's part of the whole as opposed to purely kind of like directing all of the stuff as well. So I think there's a fine kind of like balance to have. My thing has always been, when you're training as a voice as an actor, is that, indicating is the death. It's inauthentic. It's not feeling anything, but telling the audience what to feel. Which is thought of as bad in acting, whereas in voiceover, quite often it's kind of like, no, we want to tell the audience what to feel. There's a fine line, because as soon as an audience member goes, I feel as if I'm being manipulated, I'm being told what to feel. That's where inauthenticity. If only I spoke for a living. That's when inauthenticity becomes an issue. It's like, oh, you're telling me to feel sad about this. I'm feeling emotionally manipulated, and now I'm less engaged with it. Now I don't buy it in the same way, because you're not taking me on a journey. You're not telling me a story. So that's I think the very kind of like important distinction. And in terms of the videos that I create on LinkedIn and on all of my other social media as well, that was very much me just kind of going, as an actor, I should have a craft. And part of my craft is the voiceover craft of, being able to modulate my voice and all of those kind of things. But I should also be warming up every day, and I should be also emotionally preparing in some kind of way. And I should also be kind of cold sight reading every day, not read any text, but immediately have to say it out loud. Because quite often, and especially in video games as well, you don't get to pre-read the script at all. Someone sends you a script and it's like, we're recording 3 takes of each line, please, let's go. And you're like, oh God. So I thought, okay, well, so these are things that I should be doing every day, but when I'm not actually being paid to do it, I very rarely do it for various different kind of like reasons. I don't find the time to justify it. So videoing the process was partly a way of keeping myself accountable. I said, if I video the process and I post it publicly and I say, this is something that I do every day, then it's kind of like if I stop doing it, then I'm basically publicly shaming myself that I'm not doing it. And then the other thing was just kind of thinking, like, there are loads of roles that I'll never probably get to play because I'm too old now, or I'm not the right casting, or it's already been played once and there'll be no way that it'll be recast and redone. So I was like, oh, okay, great. Well, this is a great license for me to take any kind of speech from any type of medium and then just record it and have that enjoyment to play. So it's kind of like it was an excuse to get me to do the stuff that I should be doing every day, but I wasn't doing every day. But then by coincidence, it ended up being a really good kind of like behind the scenes marketing tool, because the difference is that, it's great to have these case studies, but if you're doing a case study of actual client work, you need to clear that with your client. And very often, we as service providers want to be smooth and seamless and frictionless. So once they've paid us and we've given them everything and it's all good and it's all hunky-dory, the last thing they probably want is an email going, oh, by the way, I'd love to be able to use your stuff as, I'd just like to borrow some more of your time and potentially create some extra stress. But I would like to talk about what it was like working together in a public forum, about everything, about the entire process and what our problems were and, how we overcame the fact that you didn't understand what you wanted. Obviously, all of the clients that I work with, that's never an issue. But, it's like I could imagine if someone came to me saying like, yeah, Chris, I want to talk about, the difficult things and what we overcome. I'd be like, I was an absolute delight to work with. There were no problems whatsoever. I don't know what you're talking about. And it's kind of like, even if you do that, and yes, I've got case studies on my website because clients are great and have that conversation, but you can't pump out that quantity. So this was a way of kind of like, how could I market myself as a voice actor, but also in the world of video, not just be an omnipotent voice which is so easily forgettable, but a way of being able to be present in video, but be showcasing my voice at the same time. And I tried so many different things to market myself, but this is one of the ones that really kind of like stuck, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's brilliant, if you ask me. I mean, it's really, really good. And I'm not saying that I watch like everything that you post on LinkedIn, but
no, there's
most of it, yeah, because there's a lot. But most of them, I watch them till the end because they're just so captivating. They're just so awesome,
Well, that's very
so,
kind,
yeah,
but
kudos,
it's mainly the writing. I choose good scripts because I think they can give you different kind of challenges. I mean, very often, a lot of our work is not exactly polishing the turd, but it's kind of like you're given something very basic and uninspiring to work with, and it's the challenge of you and the people that you're collaborating with is to like, how do we make this more interesting? How do we give this drama so that an audience isn't falling asleep, but actually trying to make this engaging? So there are different challenges involved, but it makes me feel as if I'm more inclined to bring my A game to that kind of work if I'm working with good text first and foremost. It's just kind of like a sportsman analogy, just feeling as if I'm putting the reps in, I suppose, is the main thing.
Tell me something. What do you? I mean, let's shift a little bit into the video game. We already started to talk about it. A role of voiceover in explainer videos,
Yeah. The
like
sexy stuff. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
sexy
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like
Explain away,
what?
baby.
Yeah, what do you like? What kind of role do you think that voiceover plays in effectiveness of product explainer video? Let's say.
Well, I mean, it's first and foremost, it's kind of like clarity and storytelling and engagement. I would say
Mm-hmm.
it's like, are you with me? Do you really understand? So I think in terms of you can have a script on screen telling people this kind of like information, but if people may not necessarily know exactly what to pay real attention to. So it's in the tone of the voice and in the inflection and everything that you're trying to guide and steer people. And you do that through changes in pitch and changes in rhythm and changes in emphasis. By the storytelling aspect of it, you want to be, even if you're talking about ladder safety or whatever, you want to be establishing what the stakes are, what the risks are, why this is important. Being able to use kind of like humor as well, I think is vitally important to these kind of things, because we all kind of know it's kind of, we know this is a dry subject, so we've got to we've got to re-engage about it. Someone has decided that it's important for you to have these takeaways. These things are important to your job, and therefore we need to clarify exactly what they are, why. So I think it's very much to do with the stakes and having that level of engagement. Whereas if you have you can have the most engaging visuals in the world, but if someone gets lost in it, then they have to go back and rewind, and that can sometimes destroy the kind of flow. So very much depending on the project. I wouldn't say that every explainer video needs to have it, but I think it's very important, obviously, in being able to steer the audience, keep them engaged, and have that kind of emotional connection, because through the story and through the arc of it, that means that they will retain the information so much better as a result. So that tends to be the main thing. I myself, as a voice actor, though, I also operate as kind of like another pair of eyes and ears as proofreading. Because quite a lot of the explainer work that I do, my clients have English as a second language. So there's always having that kind of back and forth about, is there a better way of saying this, a more concise way of saying this, a more fun way of saying this? Quite often it's about kind of like, we know this is very dry, we know this is kind of interminable, or there's a lot of technical language here. These are the terms that we definitely have to have, but is there any way of making this more succinct or clearer, depending on who the audience is and those kind of things? So that's when, you know, the voice actor becomes a bit more of a kind of like a problem solver in that way as well. And also having an appreciation of, you know, what the visuals are doing at any kind of like time. It's one thing to kind of like narrate in isolation and someone say, we want this kind of tone, we want this kind of register, we want this kind of pacing, which is great and which is absolutely fine. But if the visuals have already been built, then it's my job to kind of fit and complement that as best as possible, but also recognize, okay, there's this issue, and there are two ways of solving it. Either you go back into the edit and you change the timing of that, or I could change this, and I'm not going to suddenly have to speed up to twice speed for 30 seconds, which is going to sound really fucking weird, and then and then slow down again. So it's kind of like I have to have the management hat on, as well as it's about the storytelling and keeping people engaged and excited and inspired about, you know, clearing out the drains today. Yeah. At the same time, which is very important, obviously, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, so if I understand you right, then it's better for you to get like a rough cut of the visuals when you are creating voiceovers, huh?
In an ideal world, yeah. Like the
world,
more, in an ideal world, if it's convenient, obviously, if it's convenient to get a sense of, this is what we're looking for, this is what we're aiming for in terms of like the vibe, in terms of the music, all of those kind of things, then they're all going to inform, you know, my choice, the kind of how I modulate my voice, how I'm going to be using the pacing, because the last thing you want is, you know, the pacing that I choose or the tone that I choose to be running completely counter to the visuals or to the music. As well, you know, if I'm suddenly kind of like dropping away and going down and slowing down as the music is supposed to be climaxing towards this kind of like point, it's just like that's awful, that's terrible. So I think having a sensitivity towards that is kind of like great, but I mean it depends. You know, that sometimes having the absolute freedom to go like, people will build their video to a degree around the voiceover, means that I don't have any concerns. And what I can then do is like, I'll offer more alternates maybe. So like, here's a straight down the line take of making it very clear. But then here's maybe a little bit more of, if the narrator has a little bit more playfulness and personality. So let's look at this, but maybe we could also have a look at this as well. So there's those kind of like hesitations, or like a real person talking, the dreaded conversational read. And, what's conversational when you're talking in an explainer language? Well, I don't know. It doesn't really exist. But anyway, so kind of finding that balance a little bit more. So, different approaches will fit for different workflows. So there's no one kind of like way. But I love to be able to see like, oh, this is what you're envisaging. Now I can suit it to a degree. Without it, but not to the extent where it's completely locked. Someone's already put an AI voiceover, so it's all exactly timed. Because then I'm like, I can't escape that shell, that shape that you've kind of created. And very often there are issues, because AI voiceover, as good as it is now, still will do things that I, as a performer, and especially as a performer desperately trying to justify my humanity and authenticity, I'm going to play against deliberately. I think reads from voice actors, from human voice actors, are going to be more humanized, much more so, as AI, as I could just get a nice, solid, clear sounding, nice sounding voice, for next to nothing. It kind of goes like, oh, so that's kind of useless if that's your selling point as a voice actor.
We're going to return to this AI topic because it's really interesting. I mean, I saw that your friend came into your studio.
Yeah. That's Honey, my cat. She was just kind of, what's going on? Yeah, Honey, my 10-year-old rescue cat. She just kind of comes in occasionally, and
cool.
And then goes like, "Are you doing something vaguely professional? Good, fine." And then like, then I'll leave. It's okay.
I also have a cat. My girlfriend found it last December. He was lost.
Oh.
I think he was abandoned, and now, when the spring began, we kind of realized why this cat was abandoned, because he is just like such a nightmare.
Okay.
I mean, he's fine. Like now we coexist, and we are getting better. Like I see positive trend,
Okay.
We are getting along. But there was like a month ago, there was a time when I was just like, I cannot do this anymore.
Have you had like cat counseling or anything like that, or have you just gone on YouTube or?
There's nobody in Slovenia who is doing cat counseling, and I found a person from, I think she was Dutch.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. I wrote to her. She wrote back, but then she just then when she asked, like, did you go to the vet, like all the basic stuff, and I said, yeah, we did, like everything is fine, like he's fine. So tell me more about this cat. I sent her like long email with everything, and then was silent after that.
Like,
so I was like,
this cat's got too many issues. Okay. I mean, we've not had to use like cat counselling as such, but there's always an American. There's an American kind of like cat guru called Jordan Galaxy, who used to have a TV show. And now he dispenses kind of like advice, life lessons on all of, various different kind of cat related issues, pet related issues, that kind of stuff. And we've picked up some tips with this kind of thing, because Honey, as a rescue cat, used to be, she's an indoor only cat, but she used to be really kind of like scatty around people, really kind of like fearful, that kind of thing. So just implementing some very kind of like simple things for us has made kind of like a huge kind of difference. But this is the level of parenting that I can get along with and get okay with. So it's all right, really. Just basically parenting via YouTube.
Yeah.
There it is. It is what it is.
It is what it is. I agree.
But you're making an important difference about cats, so that's okay. Sorry. Yeah. You're changing lives feline
I think
lives.
I do. I think I do. You know, come
Yeah.
on, like I'm proud of myself.
Yeah.
Also, I was like a month ago. I was like telling to my girlfriend, he needs to go.
He needs to go. It's him or me.
Yeah, it's him or me. Yeah,
And the girlfriend's
exactly.
like, ooh. And you're like, okay, I didn't like that uncertainty, that not immediate kind of like, okay. It's like, right, okay, well, maybe I'll reassess. Maybe it doesn't have to be. Okay, yeah, I was joking. Oh, shit. Yeah, okay.
Or like, tell me, Chris, like, how do you prepare for? Obviously, when you're doing different voiceover gigs, obviously you prepare differently for explainer video, for ads, or for gaming gigs. Like, which one of those three are like the most complicated?
I mean, yeah, each one is different, but I think it's finding that balance between preparing but not over preparing. Because as soon as you go into a recorded session, you know, it's a bit like you going to a shoot or anything. As soon as you're actually dealing with other people and other factors, all bets are kind of off. Then you know what you're actually going to find. So if I read the script so many times and I've annotated it up and I know exactly how I'm going to say it and all of that kind of stuff, it's guaranteed that the person that I then am working with will have their completely different agenda. It'll be like, what? Why have you decided to do it in this kind of like way with this particular energy, this particular kind of pace, that kind of thing? And because I've done all of that preparation, it'll be that much more difficult to kind of like shift. So you need to let that go. At the same time, you can't just completely wing it because there's often language or names or pronunciations or things where you're just like, I don't know how you say that. Or there's 5 different ways of saying that, depending on, you know, where you come from. So I need to be aware of all of these kind of things. Or there's that really fantastic line that you have in the middle of the script, which is like 10 sentences long with no punctuation. I need to find a way of being able to find where to breathe in that. So that I don't sound like an AI or, you know, and so that the listener doesn't kind of like go mad as well. So it's always finding that kind of like balance. I mean, with the video games, sure, you get a lot of, you'll probably get a similar amount of information, to be honest, like prior to the session, which is like a character biography, an image of some sort to respond to. A little bit about their motivations, but not that much more than you might get from an explainer video about this is the brand, this is what the video is about, and this is what they want the audience from. End. Okay, right. It's quite often, and then there's probably some form of a reference. So for a video game, they may go, there's this kind of vocal reference or this kind of character that we're thinking of. And similarly, you know, with your explainer video, you'll get a link to these are some of the videos that they've done in the past, or this is the bit from from your portfolio that they like the sound of. So this is the kind of thing to kind of like keep in mind. And then there's the session begins and you've got to play. And with video games, you don't, because you very, very rarely get the script even in advance of the session. You get it in the session. So you can't prep the lines at all in the slightest. And that's actually kind of, I mean, it's a bit of a curse, but you've got to turn it into a blessing, which is like you're spontaneously reading it and inhabiting it. And there's something quite freeing about that. Whereas with, you know, an explainer video or a corporate thing, it's about having to rediscover it every single time so that, you know, if it's the 10th or the 20th read that you're doing this, that your voice isn't getting slowly more and more, I don't know, passive aggressive maybe, or it's like, why are we I know that you're going to go with the first take that we did. Oh God! But here we go. And it's like, you know, when you're conscious of like in a session, people going, I've paid for an hour, so I need to use the hour. And so it's like, let's try it every single way possible. And it's like, I'm up for experimentation, but at the same time, just let's go absolutely crazy just for the sake of it. It's like, you're wasting your time, you're wasting my time, but I'm not going to say that out loud because I'm still being paid for my time. But, you know, I would say there are better ways of being able to utilize that time. So that's the whole reason why, you know, I'll for certain projects, I'll go with a client like, if we think we've got it, and if you're happy that we think we've got it, then I'll hold these 20 minutes. And if you want me to, you know, do something as a pickup or anything further down the line, we can use those 20 minutes and I won't charge you. It just kind of like formalizes the kind of, oh, could you do us a favor type of thing without anybody having to waste time. It just makes it a little bit more sense. If you actually think you've got like, let's do a take for safety and let's experiment by all means. But it's like, if we've still got time in the bank, one of the benefits of me having a home studio is that I don't have to go back into the studio to record and then come back out. There's no travel. For me to go like, you've got 20 minutes in the bank, and if that means that someone 3 or 4 levels above you suddenly goes, no, this line has to be different, then I won't charge you a pickup fee for it. Or we won't have that slightly awkward thing about like, oh yeah, how much do you charge for your pickup fee? And me go like, it's on my terms and conditions, but anyway. But of course I won't charge for you because I want to be re-employed and I want to be easy. But at the same time, I need to hold myself to the standards and accountability and how. Yeah, it's kind of like, so it formalizes that by just kind of going like, you've got 10 minutes. If it takes me 2 minutes to do, then you've got 8 minutes. Fine. So yeah, I mean, you've got to have that level of spontaneity, I think, because if you're alive in the performance, if it's an explainer video, a corporate video, a documentary or whatever, but if there's that sense of aliveness in the moment, then that's what's going to connect with an audience as well. So you have to have that. You can't. The danger is over preparing and being too rigidly set on. This is the thing that I need to be aiming for, and if I don't get that, then I'm going to get angry or difficult.
Yeah, of course. Interesting. Like, do you? I mean, for sure. But I'm just curious if you can feel the difference when you get a script for the explainer video, and you can immediately say this was done by ChatGPT.
I mean, I would like to say, oh yes, but I've been encountered some stuff which I've been reassured was done by a human who didn't really care, and I'm like, oh god, okay, right. So I don't want to say for certain, like, oh no, it was definitely ChatGPT's fault, because it's kind of like. I mean, this is the interesting thing about what? Sorry, the cat's come back in again. She wants another round. It's like. Not quite as productive or as articulate as I thought you might be, Chris. So I'm just going to intervene now. Yeah, I mean, because what a lot of this kind of AI stuff does is it kind of homogenizes. So it's not that it's necessarily even bad. It's just really bang average. And it's using the same generic terms that a lot of people cling to when they're getting, I've done videos about, the same, let's use the word synergy. How many times can we use synergy or, raising the bar and all of this kind of generic stuff. And because what ChatGPT is going like, what's popular right now? What are people using all the way everywhere? And then kind of smushes it together. You get this kind of most unmemorable. I mean, it's like it ticks all of the boxes, but in the most unmemorable way possible to do it. But then there are some human copywriters who are not capable of that. So I can't say that it's the worst thing in the world. But then it's like there's no character here. There's no attempt to engage or make it intriguing for the audience, even if it is kind of like in a world where we care about X, Y, or Z thing for, the 50th time ever. There's no attempt to be original, or there's no kind of like stakes involved. And I think that is kind of like the real issue. It's kind of like addressing that kind of like mid-range, very stereotypical language and going like, is there any way, not like we're trying to reinvent the wheel here, but can we make it so that people's eyes don't immediately glaze over in terms of, I know exactly what this is and I don't care. I really don't care. And that's fine. But I mean, but also, the challenge as well is to go like, this is really grey, kind of like, doing the ladder safety stuff. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel about how you use a ladder. You need to know the good things and the bad things, and I don't need to be kind of like confusing in any way. But even so, then it's about kind of like little nuances and trying to find something that keeps people's attention, or even with like repeated phrasings. In this e-learning thing that I'm doing at the moment right now, you have at the end of every question, it'll say like, choose the answer at the end that you think it is from, these 3 or 4 different things. And if it's like, if that line is kind of copy and pasted throughout with the same slightly upbeat, hey, okay, sure, out of context, whatever it is you think, and let's move on to the next thing. There's a kind of a generalized energy. But then if it's like the question is to do about something really quite serious, for example, someone's just fallen into the machine and lost a leg or something, to then go, okay, so how do you think we're going to save Steve today? Do we pull his other leg? Do we pull his head? Or do we just give up and hope that it's a quick death for him? You know, it's kind of like you got to have an awareness. You have to have a cognition about what it is that you're talking about. And very often there's that, especially because AI and a lot of AI content, it's kind of like it's homogenized, but it doesn't actually understand what it's talking about. It's just giving you the best approximation. And that's where there's very often this kind of detachment. And so again, with my humanization hat on, I'm just kind of looking for any of those kind of like opportunities. But kind of it becomes very much about injecting stakes into it, injecting a kind of emotion. If the text suggests no emotion, I can't go emotionless. Even if it's kind of instructional, it's kind of, I come from a family of teachers, so it's got to be the why do you need to learn this lesson? What's important about it? You know, and kind of like go and then make some different kind of choices rather than going, I've got to sound very clear and that's it. Because, I mean, then get an AI to do it. Like, seriously do. I mean, an AI of my voice if it becomes available, but yeah.
Did you get approached by a company that would like to source your voice basically and use it? Like, can you?
Yeah.
Are you
So
okay
I've worked with a couple of
this?
different ones. Yeah, I've worked with a couple of different ones, and none of the models are working at the moment right now. In terms of the business models, I hasten to add. So there was one company that I worked with where I'd spent about 25 hours recording lots of different things about 2 years ago. And an AI version of my voice was created. And they basically couldn't find a marketplace for it. They couldn't. They had a bank of probably about 100, 150 different voices. And what they, I think, were trying to basically sell it as was kind of like being the voice of a company. So a company could come to them and say, we want to buy this voice outright. And this will be our company voice and all of that kind of thing. And there wasn't a lot of demand for it, they found, strangely, because, I mean, it's partly because a voice actor can't sign off their entire, voice for one company. So there's that issue. You can't actually get exclusivity for that. And also, the technology is developed so rapidly that what took 20 hours then now takes 3 minutes or 30 seconds. So it would be so easy for you pay however many thousands of dollars for a company voice, someone's going to copy it and do a parody video of it or something, and then what happens? Then you change the company voice. Okay, so the 50,000 or 100,000 or 10,000 or whatever that you've paid for it is completely gone. So there was that, and so that's been kind of like wound up. And then the other one that I've worked with is 11 Labs, which is kind of like the mecca of, I mean, it's the poster whatever of a lot of AI voice stuff. So I wasn't exactly like, if you can't beat them, join them. But I was also like, if I just say they're the work of the devil, then it's not necessarily. Then great, you can demonize them, but you don't understand what other things are going on. What are their actual kind of like motives? What are they trying to do? That kind of thing. And so the best thing to do is have dialogues. That's where my first experience with an AI voice provider was. The people involved with that were really, the work originated from people who had lost their voice, being able to get an AI version of their voice. So rather than somebody else's voice, it was able through either previous recordings and or their physiology to be able to recreate that kind of like voice. So there are a lot of actually really important things that AI can solve in that respect. So not everybody is a capitalist, devious pig dog. However, there are issues. And one of the issues is the fact that a lot of AI voice providers have gone in really far too bloody low in terms of like what they're offering for the rates that they are.
What do you mean by that?
In terms of like, oh, we're advertising for only $5 subscription per month. You can have X number thousand of words, you know, like in this voice for free. It's like if I, as a voiceover talent, am going to sub-license the my AI voice for some passive income, so that then it still needs to be at a certain level at a certain rate for it to be a viable option for me, because there's things like because then otherwise if it's my sound of voice, like if the market becomes swamped by my AI voice, then my real voice is associated with that. It's like the TikTok voices that come along there. We've all heard them, whether or not you've thought that they were the TikTok voice or not. But those 2 or 3 kind of like American male voices, which will now occasionally pop up in commercials on Instagram or whatever and everywhere. And you kind of go like, oh yeah, I know that's an AI voice and it's that kind of thing. But if that person was actually, I don't know if they are, but if the person who originated that voice was doing any other voiceover work and you heard that voice, your immediate association with, oh yeah, it's the AI voice thing. Right, okay. So that colors what brands that you can work with, what type of work that you do. How can you play a character in a video game that isn't that AI voice? How can you be a brand voice for Google or BMW or, you know, the cafe down the road if that's the first connotation with that kind of voice? And also... I mean, to begin with, anyway, a lot of AI voice kind of providers just didn't understand the whole concept of usage and licensing of voice at all. You know, it was just kind of like, you can make, you know, $10 per month with this amazing passive income thing. And it's like, no, each usage contract that I have is, you know, even the in perpetuity things, there are clear designations of where it can be used and where it can't be used. Normally, I have to have some kind of time limit for it, something, you know, the difference between internal and external kind of content licensing, all of the boring kind of like stuff. But, you know, this is essential in being able to kind of like license all of these things. And so it's a kind of like a tricky balance, I think, in many ways, because at the same time, I understand that, you know, companies like 11 Labs, on the one hand, they want to be building relationships with voice actors. At the same time, their main priority is to attract investors. They want to be bought out so that people can go on and utilize their tools brilliantly. Yes, but it runs at a profit. Whereas at the moment, it's a proof of concept. And I think it's an iffy. It's a grey area about how much of a proof of concept it is. You know, now, yes, you've got 11 Labs, but you could go to Artlist and get the AI voice from there, where you get your royalty-free music at the same time. So why would you go to 11 Labs? Oh, because you can do X, Y, or Z voice clone, or you could do, you know, they've started doing like licensing, you know, Hollywood stars from the past, like iconic voices or something for certain things. And it's like, okay, or you could use another AI provider to copy that voice from other content out there and do the same. It's like, it's a bit of a shit show, definitely.
It is.
So it becomes like the conversation about like, okay, so what cases are really useful for AI voices? And there's certainly where clarity and speed, just like getting stuff done, I totally get it and I totally understand it. And I think it will likely... It's not quite had the effect that people feared yet with the voice acting industry, but I can see, like, in terms of those early jobs, I can see it completely destroying the market in terms of, you know, when people were first trying to get established, doing, like, very low demand kind of, like, stuff, which doesn't necessarily require the best kit or doesn't require the best acting. Well, if that goes to AI instead... then how do you learn? How do you build your business from that point? Then that's a kind of like a big issue. So I can feel the talent is going to kind of potentially separate quite severely as a result of that, and that's kind of like a going concern. And then there's also there are a lot of ways in which AI could really help my life as a voice actor and take care of a lot of the boring jobs for me. But because that's not really a big kind of focal point for a lot of these companies, it's kind of going by the wayside. So, for example, I could do an audiobook and, maybe I have like 100 pickups that I got to do because I misread something or the pronunciation of the character's name was slightly off. And so I've got to go back over every single one there. So in theory, you've already got a performance, a human performance, and it's literally about copying and pasting a word out. Now, for me, being able to have an AI to do a copy and paste thing where they've got the shape of the performance already, but being able to do that would be amazing. That would be that's not taking an editor's job because it's usually a voice talent who has to edit. Or even then, it's not like the best use of an editor's work. I mean, each one of these AI things is going to affect somebody's job to some degree. So I understand. It's not like it's great and we all work exactly the same amount of time. But it's like for me, that suddenly would make audiobooks far more viable, as a result, because it's like I don't have to worry about the 150 pickups because it's just human that, if you're speaking for 10 minutes, you're going to say something. You're going to say one thing wrong, probably. Unless you're an absolute veteran, and skilled and pride yourself on that. And there are those people that can do that. But for me, I will make some kind of slip or verbal whatever. So I will have to do those kind of like pickups. But no, an automatic cutting and pasting would be great. Because at the moment there's an AI program called Positron, which literally does the it'll do the listening back and saying, these are the mistakes for you. So I don't have to listen back, or I don't have to pay someone else to listen back to it if I don't want to. So the AI can do that and identify the things. But now I still have to manually go in and re-record those sections. The next stage would be for an AI to be able to do that would mean that you're still getting the human performance, you're still getting the best of that kind of thing, but it's much quicker. And it's cheaper. I'm not charging you, more of my time because it's going to take me less time to do so. So it's potentially at a better rate. There's not going to be those things to kind of like factor in as well. And that's the kind of thing where you're trying to have these conversations with AI developers and they're like going, yeah, that sounds really cool. At the same time, I don't think the investors are that necessarily interested in this model. They're interested in that. How can we really push it and make the big bucks? So there's a tension there, and I totally understand that people are coming in, with very clear and right things, but as soon as money becomes involved, it gets tricky to negotiate, and especially when people's livelihoods are in jeopardy at the same time.
I mean, I think that if you're an artist in any type of digital artist right now, I think you feel a little bit of anxiety because of AI stuff that is coming out, because these companies are basically trying to democratize art in a way.
Totally. I hate it.
And I hate it as well, but I mean, it's like internet, I guess one day this is a part of our future. There's no doubt about it, so we will have to find a way, like you did right now with your book recordings. You found a potential way that you can leverage AI and use it for your own work.
Little tools like that can make a big difference for sure. And if people just want to hear like a clear version of my voice, and I'm not available to do like a custom audition or a custom read, but I could very quickly go like, just put this bit of script in here. It'll give you it in my voice essentially. There you go. You've got a quick reference, that kind of things. There are lots of kind of like use cases where it could be, incredible. It could be really kind of like useful. But we've got a long way to go in terms of like legislation, other kind of like use cases. It's a minefield, and especially with on social media, the tech bros kind of going, it's amazing, it's doing all of these things and blah blah blah, and it's kind of they're building their brand around this kind of first mover kind of, yeah, I'll give you all of the prompts and I'll tell you all of the things and I'm not going to engage in any of the ethical conversations because screw you, this is about, you know, the next level. And you're like, great, this is the whole reason why I wanted to be an artist. I hate everyone involved in this. You know, so it's very easy to just go, okay, kind of like survival of the fittest type of approach, and it's never the anybody who has actually got anything artistic about them, who always kind of like advocate this stuff, somewhat surprisingly. So
yeah, I don't see. I mean, I don't see a problem with AI tools. I see the problem with tech bros. I mean,
yeah, where's the mindset that goes with it?
Yeah.
And it's this sense. It's the sense of entitlement, and this, and also, you know, around intellectual property generally. Like, I'm aware, for example, of you know, the content that I was talking about. You know, doing the speeches and stuff like that. That's other people's writing that I am performing. So there's a thing called fair use, right? Which is like, if it's for educational purposes, then potentially there's something. So my thing is about the fact that I'll always do an extract. I'll never do the full something of something. I'll always describe exactly where it comes from. You know, so people can find the original, because that's kind of part of the joy of celebrating this kind of like work. It's like, if you want to see more, read this book, watch this thing. I think this is kind of like great. And also, I don't monetize it, because if I monetize the content, then it's like, okay, so I am profiting off of somebody else's stuff. And it's like, after every podcast or after every audiobook, it's kind of like, the rights of these cannot be redistributed and all of this kind of thing. So you've got to have that level of awareness. And even still then, there's a grey area. If anybody turns around and said to me, take that video down of this kind of stuff. I mean, it's not happened in 3 years, but if someone did, then I would. Immediately, because maybe they thought like, there's already an audiobook version of this and yours is competing with that, even though it's not, because I've recorded 3 minutes of you know, but still, that, you know, there's a fine line always to be of like negotiated. So you've got to be aware of that sensitivity. But it's not the same as, you know, the line of saying like, oh, it's exactly how we as human beings learn, is that we take everything, you know, that we're stimulated by, and then we kind of mess it up in our subconsciousness, and nothing is innately original. We're all just recreating what we've done. And you're like, no, that's not quite how the human mind works. That's not true. And learning at all. But then you get on a whole philosophical debate.
We copy from each other. I mean, for sure, you know about the book Still Like an Artist. I mean, yeah, sure. I get inspired by somebody's video and I try to recreate it, but I don't like recreate it as a total copy of it. You know, I try to put myself in it, because I would feel ashamed of just copying it straight out, you know, and
that's not creative. Yeah, it's kind of like, it's through the attempt
of copying.
Yeah, you know, it's like it's through the attempt of either trying to replicate and then failing to, or kind of trying to find something on your own terms and failing to one degree or another. That's where kind of like the happy accidents kind of like occur, and that's where you find your own voice as an artist. You know, it's not up to me to you know, say how much it's close or not close to. I think there's an interesting, without going down a whole weird other tangent, but it's like it's very interesting, because there's a kind of like a social media culture where I'm always fascinated about, you know, the miming, people miming to other kind of stuff, but also like people who will call themselves actors on social media, but you never hear them speak. It's always like the original person's lines, the original actor's lines and performance, and they're always mimicking along to it. And then all of the comments are, oh my God, amazing acting. And it's like, sure, but it's a huge aspect of your instrument is your voice. I'm going to say that as a voiceover artist, obviously, as a voice actor, I'm going to say that. But it's kind of like, yeah, I don't hear you speaking your content. There's a weird iterative how we relate and understand, but it's kind of like, that is part of kind of like the human creative kind of like endeavor, trying things on for size. But it's not just copy paste. Oh no, the logo's still on it. No, of course it's not trained on an air, you know, on stuff that hasn't been kind of like cleared. Yeah, and you know, the fact that they're flagrantly open about it, you know, OpenAI and all of this kind of stuff. They're asked straightforwardly, is this trained on, YouTube videos outside of the remit with permissions and stuff like that? And I'll just be like, but that's not what we're interested in. That's not the conversation that we're interested in having. Okay, great.
Yeah, now we open the
Anyway.
yeah.
Yeah.
When we were talking about this, I remembered about the not so long back the ChatGPT 4.0, I think, or 4, I don't know, the latest model basically. So they copied the voice of Scarlett Johansson, right, or something along those lines.
Well, they got a sound alike. So they basically asked Scarlett Johansson, I think at least twice, if not 3 times, purely because of the association of her voice with the film Her, where she was playing an AI. So there's that kind of, isn't that cool, kind of like parallel, like kind of sort of missing the whole theme of that film, right? Like completely missing the whole point of the actual message to do with that film about an AI that actually outgrows its human and dispenses with him. Yeah. No, we're not taking that bit of the message. It's the bit that sounds like the Hollywood film star. That's the bit that we think, that would be cool, wouldn't it? If Scarlett, was just in our pocket telling us that we look pretty. That kind of thing. So she said no 3 times, and then they basically hired someone who was an identikit, kind of like voice match. And then Scarlett Johansson's lawyers kind of went, fuck's sake. Well, I mean, no, you need to take this down because it may not be her voice, but it's like we all know what's going on here, and they've kind of decided to put that on the back burner for now. But yeah, so there are all these kind of like associations, which would if that was the voice, then Scarlett Johansson's entire brand and career would be affected by the fact that as soon as she opens her mouth in her own, in her own normal voice, that association would be with whatever comes after Siri, essentially.
Yep.
And that has a massive effect on her career and the kind of work that she'd be able to do. I'm not saying that that's like with full consent and full awareness of that. That's one thing. I mean, I was auditioned for a major provider who I can't name to be the AI voice, and I didn't get it. Otherwise, you would know about it. But the remuneration was roughly comparable with, I think, the risk involved in like being. I would be probably the next Siri. I mean, it's still like. Yeah, it's 6 figures, but it's low 6 figures. So there's risks because it's like because for anybody who's casting commercial for the next 10 years, they'll probably hear that voice of somewhere before, and they may go, "Oh, that's the voice of my phone. That can't be the voice of this super cool thing that we're doing here because it's the voice in everybody's phone already." You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
You don't hear the Siri voice in many other places now that you're aware of anyway, for a reason. So there's got to be that level of awareness 2 ways.
This is really interesting. I never thought about it like this, but yeah, you're right. I mean, like subconsciously you just connect stuff with whatever is most prevalent, I guess, around you, So yeah, if you're hearing the Siri voice every day,
ride on that on the coattails in a kind of tongue-in-cheek way with the kind of like the budget Benedict Cumberbatch. It's not because I do a Benedict Cumberbatch impression. I don't, but I've got kind of the right kind of vocal print that kind of matches in terms of the accent and in terms of the pitch and general tone, that kind of thing. So it acts as a very easy kind of quick reference association thing. It's kind of like cheeky and kind of like playful, so it can work sometimes as a bit of a trade-off. But I don't like dress up as Benedict Cumberbatch and don't build my entire online identity and persona around that, because I think that's really risky and not necessarily in a good way. It's good to niche, sure, but I think there's kind of like hyper niching where it's just like that just seems a bit creepy. Or people who can do a good David Attenborough impression, that's great, but it's like when they can copy an AI version of David Attenborough anyway, it's kind of that's pointless. It's like sure, but make it a skill so you can do that voice in a particular spot if it requires you to. But if it's like your whole brand is orientated around creating somebody else's voice, then that I think is like massively under threat, I would say.
I agree. I mean, it can be for a certain period when you're searching for yourself. Like at the beginning, when you're searching for your voice, yeah, sure. Like try different stuff. I also tried millions different ways of doing a photograph or a video, until I kind of realized that like I just like a particular how to say, like particular way of doing it, and this is my voice, if I can say it like this.
Yeah. I mean, you've got to discover your own journey through it by all means, and I think you'll find that depending on the different genres that you're working in as well. So it's quite a nice kind of process of discovery, as you kind of quite often we start by niching down. And for me, just because of how I sounded, a lot of corporate stuff came to me very early, so I doubled down on that. I kind of built my brand around that because it was most easily replicated, and because corporate work it's more consistent. You can get more consistent work from clients rather than video game stuff or documentary stuff, that kind of thing. And then as you diversify, that's when you can explore different aspects of your skill set and get a clear idea of what other niches that you could kind of like work in as well. So it's a bit of a balancing act there.
Yeah, of course. All right, Chris. I think we talked a lot.
Sorry, it's an occupational hazard.
I have a question here about your cat, but we already talked about your cat. So
yeah, she's the power behind the throne, and she's left now at the moment anyway. So yeah.
But before I leave you, I have one question that I ask all my guests. Okay. That's it. Like, what pisses you off the most in your line of work?
Freelancing complaint 101. Late payment. I've got like $5,000 at the moment right now that I'm owed, and I'm like, what are we doing here? Yeah, you can automate it, and you can try these different strategies, and you can have these terms and conditions and all of this kind of stuff. I mean, I now, even though my payment terms are 30 days, I wait 90 before I personally kind of start going like, because 7 years down the line of having to chase this kind of like stuff, I just don't waste the energy. I wish I was in an industry where all of my clients could pay like upfront or 50% upfront, but not all of them can. So I can't make that a hard and fast rule. But it's true in terms of like people can be well-meaning and lovely on the emails and stuff, but I'm like, yeah, you owe me £800, and now you're not responding quite so quickly to these emails, and it's not my problem in terms of if your end client hasn't paid you. If you didn't have the money or the liquidity for that, that's a conversation that you should have had with me beforehand, not gone like, oh no, I'm sorry, there's been a delay, or whatever. I've only had one person where it's like they were dodgy. They tried to do me out of the money entirely. I went to the end client, shopped them in essentially, and managed to get the money back before their company went bust. And so I've taken someone to court and done it, but I don't have the energy. So it's just the energy of going like, oh God, I've got to do it. And from my own thing as a freelancer, as much as we say, it shouldn't matter that kind of much. When my virtual assistant does something for me, when my proofreader does something for me, when my editor does something for me, I pay ASAP. I pay on the day, or I pay at the latest in that same kind of like week. Because I just think on the principle of like, you've done the work. You shouldn't be waiting 30 days for it. If it's in my power to put the money in your account, I'm sure my accountant would be like, that's not the best way of operating your cash flow. But I'm like, yeah, I know. But in terms of building my relationships with people, the people who I pay on time are more likely to want to work with me again. Or recommend me or anything else like that. Generally think I'm a good person to kind of like work with. Regardless of for what service it is. So it's a boring one, but it's a reason why like if you want a guaranteed number of likes on LinkedIn, just post about like unpaid invoices. You are guaranteed like a red rag to a bull. It's the one thing that everybody can agree on.
Yeah, I actually don't have many of those. I mean,
Good, good.
yeah, because as what we do as video producers, like I always say 50%
Yeah.
in front, but in the past when I wasn't when I didn't believe in myself so much, so I was like a little bit like, okay, they're going. Like, I don't want to start the conversation about the money because maybe they're going to get scared, whatever, blah blah blah, you know. And so yeah, it happened to me like twice or three times in my career that I had to not take them to court, but here in Slovenia you have this is quite like automatized, whatever. You know.
No, I mean,
and they just get a notice. They just get a notice, and if they don't pay in, I think in 1 week or 2 weeks, then the court like sits on their bank account and they cannot do anything with it. You know?
Yeah, no, I mean that's great.
So this is awesome here, you know. So I need to admit, yeah, I don't have much of this kind of experience, but also I didn't work with those guys any longer, of course.
No, I mean,
I still have a client that doesn't pay on time, but this guy always like comes to me and says, "Listen, Uros, we have some money issues.
Yeah.
Can we wait?" He's upfront.
Yeah,
and
that's fine. It's like ultimately, at the end of the day, it's about communication. It's when something.
Exactly.
It's just like when an email isn't responded to within a week. Of just like, I just want to know what the situation is. Even that as a kind of clarity, when that kind of level of courtesy, it's like they're trying to ignore that kind of thing, then that tells me everything that I need to know about how you value me, about how you value this relationship, kind of going forward. Brilliant, fantastic. We will not work again, but also give me my money. So I can get out of it. And I mean, maybe it is like, I mean, for certain projects, I do like insist on paying and getting paid 50% up front for a lot of the stuff. For a lot of the more commercial things, this is the annoying thing because so many people are signing off and so many different things. You very rarely can go like, yeah, but I need it now, or I need 50% right now. I like before I'm saying a word. It's that, and so there's always that awkward kind of thing about like, oh, you're replaceable at any time. We could just swap you in and swap you out. But I think it is also kind of like facing your fears thing to a degree as well. So it does make me more inclined to go like having a more upfront kind of like minimum, just going so I know like, okay, you do have a bank account and you do have money in that bank account. That's something. So yeah, I mean that's my mundane, that and the AI tech bros, but otherwise everybody else is like, yeah.
Awesome. All right, Christopher, thank you so much for being on the show. I really enjoyed this conversation we had.
I did too. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Hope we can, maybe in the future we can do it again.
Yeah,
maybe we can talk a little bit more about the tech bros, you know.
Don't come and try and cancel me or something. I don't know or care that much. But anyway, that's what block button is for.
I'm joking.
Okay.
All right, that's it. That's another episode of VideoSavvy Marketer. It's under wraps. Thank you, Chris, for taking the time and coming on the show. As I said, it was awesome. And guys, if you enjoyed the conversation I had with Chris, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, of course. Your support helps us bring more and more like expert insights and interesting discussions on the show. And as always, if you have any questions, comment section down below, and see you next time, and stay savvy.